Hi, my name is Shawn Reese. I am 49 years old, and I'm originally from Marshall, Missouri. Came here from Columbia, Missouri. At the age of 11, my dad was arrested for 4 counts of murder, and later on convicted and sentenced to the death penalty in the state of Missouri. From the age of 11 to approximately 15, I started dabbling with drugs and alcohol. I started drinking with my cousin on the weekends, smoking pot with my brother, and by the time I was 16, I was using regularly cocaine and weed. By the time I was 22, I had 2 children, and I was engaged to be married. My fiance and I were living in Ashland, Missouri, and one day I had received a phone call from my dad's caseworker at the prison in Potosi, Missouri. She told me what the phone call was about, and then proceeded to tell me that my dad wanted to give me the details. So when he got on the phone, he said that he had tried to get a hold of my brother, but with no success. He got a hold of me to ask if I would be there for him at his execution. So, out of loyalty and love for my dad, I agreed. And the caseworker got back on the phone and told me I would be getting a call from the warden with further details about who was going to be on the visiting list and what date it would actually take place. So the following day, I received a call from a man named Don Roper, the warden of Potosi Prison. He explained to me the process that was going to take place on the day of the execution, and the date was set for August 13th of 97. So, fast forward to August 13th, myself and my wife, or my fiance, and her mom and dad, who drove us to Potosi, went down to the prison. And there was a rotation order of who would visit that day, with me starting the rotation and then me ending the rotation. At 9:45 that night, my last visit was over, and we were asked to leave the prison, and they would call us whenever it was time to come back. So at approximately 11:40 that evening, I received a phone call at my motel room from the warden saying to come back. So we got in the car and we left. Drove the 5 minutes to the prison, and when we got there, we encountered a candlelight vigil and a protest. People were protesting my dad's execution. Shortly thereafter, we found ourselves sitting in a room that was overlooking the execution chamber, but it was being hidden by a blind from the room that we were in. At approximately 11:58, the blinds raised, and I could see the execution chamber. My dad lay there on a gurney with a white sheet pulled up to his neck. There was nothing else in the room. There was a small window. Underneath the window was a small hole where an IV came through and ran underneath the sheet and into my dad's arm. At 11:59, Don Roper read the execution warrant and asked my dad if he had any other words. At that time, my dad turned his head and looked at me, and he said, "I love you, Shawn." tell everyone I love them. And he turned around and looked at the ceiling. Don Roper announced that the execution would begin. And I seen the first of the chemicals, sodium pentothal, start coming through the line and disappear under the sheet. He went to sleep. He coughed twice. And within 30 seconds, they pronounced him dead. I left the prison that night, and I hit my knees and I cussed God, and I told him I hated him for allowing that to happen to me and my family. And that began a mountain of pain in my life. I was 22 years old when that happened, and over the course of 26 years, I battled drugs and alcohol to try and numb the pain. The whole time, and multiple suicide attempts later, I never realized that God had his hand on my life and was pushing me down a path that led me here to Heartland. I realized that it had finally gotten to a point that I just was tired of it, and that it had gone too far when I was looking at a life sentence over something I thought was petty. There's not any words that I could ever express the way I felt the day that they said they wanted to give me 24 years for stealing a license plate and a lawnmower trailer. It was probably the most petty crime I'd ever been accused of, but I'd been accused of a lot of crimes at that point. So the judicial system was tired of me. I hit my knees in the jail cell, and I cried out to God and told him that I was sorry and that this couldn't be my legacy, and to please help me. I was tired of hurting people. I'd already blown every relationship to the wayside. My kids, my wife, my mom. I hadn't seen my mom since 2019 at this point in time. So within a week, I found myself in the courtroom and being handed a application for Heartland. So, well, it's got to be God telling me that here's my opportunity to make things right with him and everybody else. So I filled out the application. A week later, I had an interview with Eric Tribble. He accepted me at Heartland. February 16th, I came to Heartland with four people in my heart that I hated. My dad, Don Roper, the man that executed him, myself, and God. And I did not know how I would ever find forgiveness for them, but I had to have hope that there was such a thing. So I was assigned a group leader. His name is J.C. Morgan, and I told him about my dad, the problems I'd had in my family, the issues that surrounded my dad with drug abuse and criminal history due to drugs. Within 3 months, I remember sitting and talking to JC in his office one day, and we were talking about my dad, and he kept looking at the bulletin board behind me, and he said, "Do you realize that the man that executed your dad is on the bulletin board behind you?" And I look up and there's a picture of JC and Don Roper on his bulletin board. And I thought it was just ironic. But by this time, I had started a relationship with God again and began the forgiveness process of all four of those men. JC explained that Don Roper was his friend and mentor, and that he was a big part of Heartland. I want to emphasize that the whole time, for 26 years after my dad's execution, I tried to find a support group or someone that could understand or had been through what I'd been through over my dad, and I never could. And God saw it fit to put me right where I needed to be to get the support and the reconciliation of that relationship through JC. Helped me with the forgiveness of Don Roper, because I understand now that he didn't want to do what he was doing. It was a job and it was his duty. I forgave him, my dad. I was really mad at my dad, not hurt over him. I came to all these conclusions through JC's help, through scripture, through counsel, seeking God, and through laying it all down at the cross, at the foot of Jesus. I have a peace in my heart now to this day, and I know that there is hope, and that I never have to go back down that road again. I think God has used everything in my life not as a condemnation that would come from the devil, but as a don't forget where you came from, but do it better next time. And that's probably the best story I can tell you. My mom had passed after I got here as well. She passed October 6th of this year. Around the 1st of October, I got a phone call that said she was in the hospital and that she wasn't doing too well. I found myself sitting by her hospital bed and confessing everything I'd ever done to her. And I had to tell her I was sorry. I got to read scripture with her, found out she knew the Lord. And she told me she forgave me. I would just tell them that don't give up hope. There's always somebody that can point them in the right direction, and that all they need really is Jesus in their life. There's so many instances where I felt like I didn't know who to turn to or who would listen to me and understand, but through reading scripture, I've come to realize that Jesus and God are the entity that I wish I would have known about then when all this began. There's hope, and there's freedom and peace.